There comes a time in every horror fan's life when they are describing a film to a normie, and eventually the description boils down to, look, that's just the premise of the film. You process this however you need to process it. This is one of those films. If there's an area horror can consistently mine without fear of running out of material, it's the anxiety of feeling unsafe in your own home. It's a fear I find myself returning to constantly in this genre.
Come on out, Julia.
The idea that the sanctuary, the one place where the armor is supposed to come off, has been violated. Usually horror movies externalize this fear through the slasher, the masked intruder, or the ghost in the attic. But occasionally, you'll find a film that strips away the anthropomorphic villain entirely, leaving you with something far more primal. I want to talk about Mario Orfini's 1988 film, Fair Game. This video contains spoilers, so consider watching the film first before you continue. And if you like what you see, click the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to click the little bell to be notified for new videos. Fair Game is a film that sits awkwardly in the canon of late 80s Italian horror. It lacks the operatic gore of Argento or the rot-filled surrealism of Fulci. On the surface, it looks like a direct-to-video B-movie with a premise that borders on the absurd. A woman is trapped in her 1980s Art Deco loft with a venomous snake. However, I believe this film is a misunderstood exercise in minimalist tension. It's a piece of imperfect inspiration that deserves a reevaluation, not for its dialogue or its logic, which certainly falter, but for its sheer commitment to the mechanics of isolation. If we look past the cheesy 80s synth and the questionable snake physics, Fair Game reveals itself as a serviceable metaphor for the lingering, poisonous nature of toxic relationships and the paralysis of grief. Fair Game is undeniably stylish. Shot by Dante Spinotti, who would go on to shoot Heat and The Last of the Mohicans, the film is bathed in a cool nocturnal blue. The setting is crucial here, a sprawling, modernist loft in Los Angeles filled with plants, rubber creature projects, and Art Deco. It feels less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to 80s aesthetic. The premise is simplicity itself. Gene, played with manic scenery-chewing energy by Greg Henry, is a jilted lover who cannot accept that his relationship with Ava is over. He's the archetype of the abusive, controlling narcissist. He is a proto-Elon Musk, whose tech savviness has pushed him into supervillainy. Hence this lobotomusing plot. It's not enough for him to kill her. He wants her to see that leaving him was a mistake in her final moments. His weapon of choice isn't a gun or a knife, but a highly aggressive black mamba, which he acquires from a snake trainer named Frank, a brief but memorable Bill Moseley, before killing him to cover his tracks. Gene releases the snake into Eva's apartment and breaks the key off in the lock on his way out, thus sealing her in. What fascinates me about Fair Game is how it deconstructs the home invasion subgenre. Usually, the invasion is loud, chaotic, and forceful. Here, the invasion is silent. It is a slithering, hidden death. Orfini uses the camera to emphasize the vastness of the loft, turning the open space, usually a sign of luxury, into a landscape of vulnerability. Every shadow, every piece of furniture, every mannequin becomes a potential hiding spot for death. The film has its issues, certainly. It requires a suspension of disbelief regarding the behavior of snakes, which here act more like heat-seeking missiles than reptiles. Gene pays lip service to an explanation early in the movie, saying that he's going to pump the mamba up with sex hormones such that it has to bite someone or die within the hour. This will make the mamba's venom more deadly and its behavior more aggressive. And to think this isn't even the most convoluted Greg Henry kill your ex plot in the decade. Yet I argue these narrative cracks are secondary to the film's atmospheric success. It captures the feeling of being on edge after a breakup perfectly. Ava is tired. She just wants to move on with her life. The intrusion of the snake is the manifestation of the ex-partner who refuses to let go. A toxic presence that literally poisons the air of her sanctuary. The true genius of Fair Game lies in its near total lack of dialogue for the second act. Once the snake is loose, Ava is alone. She cannot reason with the killer. She cannot scream for help. The walls are soundproofed. She is forced into a silent, kinetic chess match with a biological killing machine. This is where the film transcends its premise and becomes a metaphor for trauma. Gene, the ex-boyfriend, sits in his van outside, monitoring the apartment through a portable computer system he's rigged up. He watches Ava and the snake as digital blips on a grid. effectively playing a video game where her life is the token. He has gamified her trauma. To him, her fear is content, her struggle is a high score, and her death is endgame. I find this incredibly nihilistic and ahead of its time. It predicts the detachment of the surveillance age, where suffering is viewed through a screen, sanitized and controlled by the observer. In my view, the Mamba represents the internalized poison of the relationship. Even though Gene is physically outside the house, his malice is inside, coiled and waiting. Ava spends much of the film moving slowly, breathing shallowly, trying not to trigger a reaction. And isn't this the perfect allegory for walking on eggshells around an abusive partner? The way she has to navigate her own home, checking corners, moving silently, terrified of making a sound, mirrors the behavior of someone living with deep domestic trauma. Her survival strategy is one of erasure. She has to minimize her presence, back into a corner, climb onto high furniture, and essentially try to cease to exist in the eyes of the predator. It speaks to the way trauma forces us to shrink ourselves, to shut down our warmth and humanity, just to get through the night. Although Eva is certainly guilty of some stupid moments throughout the film, the climax of the film subverts the damsel in distress trope in a way that I really appreciate. The mechanics of the genre usually dictate a chase sequence. Instead, the film slows down. It becomes a staring contest. When Eva finally turns the tables, it isn't through brute force, but by mastering her environment, the very cage Gene has built for her. After enduring an hour of terror and the requisite villain soliloquy, Ava manages to turn the trap back on Gene. In a twist of poetic justice, Gene is bitten by his own weapon. The snake strikes him in the face. But the film doesn't end with a triumphant sunrise or a sense of healing. It ends with the realization of the violation. The sanctuary is destroyed. The safety of home is gone forever. Even though she survived a physical threat, the psychological invasion is complete. The final shots linger on the ambiguity of her survival. She is alive, but she has been fundamentally altered. I often defend films like Fair Game because they take risks that polished, studio-approved horror movies won't. Is the acting sometimes melodramatic? Yes. Greg Henry is operating at an 11 out of 10, screaming and sweating in his van, treating the murder plot like it's a sporting event. But this hysteria provides a necessary counterpoint to Trudy Styler's performance, which is largely physical and silent. Orfini utilizes the snake cam, a point-of-view shot from the snake speeding across the floor, aggressively. It's a technique lifted from The Evil Dead and Jaws, but here it creates a distinct claustrophobia. We are low to the ground, alien, and predatory. By forcing us into the point of view of the threat, Orfini makes us complicit in the hunt, much like Gene watching on his monitor. The imperfections, the pacing issues in the middle act, the absurdity of the snake's seeming ability to teleport, actually contribute to the film's dreamlike, or rather nightmare-like, quality. It feels like an anxiety dream where you're trying to run but your legs are heavy, or where the geography of your own house keeps shifting. Fair Game is a stress test of a movie. It is minimalist, cruel, and visually striking. It comes up short in narrative complexity. There are no great twists, no deep lore to uncover. It is exactly what it says on the tin: a woman versus a snake. But if we look closer, using that lens of psychological metaphor, it becomes a powerful piece of filmmaking about the invasion of the self. It is about how a toxic relationship doesn't end when the partner leaves. It leaves a venom behind, hiding in the dark corners of your life, waiting to strike the moment you let your guard down. If you're feeling burned out, or if you're struggling with the anxiety of an unsafe space, this film might be a difficult watch. But for those who appreciate the mechanics of pure tension and the beauty of 80s Italian aestheticism, Fair Game is a rough-hewn gem that deserves to be pulled out of the dustbin of history and examined under the blue light of the loft. Stay warm, stay safe, wash your hands, return your shopping carts, make good choices, and I'll see you next time.